Kia ora, this is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Rowan Quinn. Tonight, more burn in your back pocket as the cost of living bites even harder. Inflation barely moves off its stubborn highs. The price of veggies is up 24%, and hold on tight if you're a homeowner. Former Labour MP Gaurav Sharma pulls the pin and triggers a by-election. The Health Minister's with us to explain how many other EDs are blowing out on wait times. Auckland's Mayor pulls the plug on Three Waters work, so where does that leave the controversial policy? And we're on board as the Lady of the Lake goes for a big birthday cruise in Queenstown. You can watch us live on Facebook, Freeview Channel 50 and Sky Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi Marie. Good afternoon, I'm Karen McCarthy. MP Gaurav Sharma says he's resigning from Parliament to preempt being ousted through waka jumping legislation. Dr Sharma, who was removed from Labour's caucus in August, says he intends to launch a new centrist party and will contest the by-election he's triggered in Hamilton West. He says he decided to resign after members of the New Zealand Council, Labour's governing body, told him the party planned to use waka jumping legislation to remove him from Parliament. He intends on launching a new centrist party to contest the by-election.
I would rather that people of Hamilton West have an MP in Parliament rather than having the current MP removed 6 months before a general election and then not having an MP in Parliament.
Gaurav Sharma does not have any evidence to substantiate his waka jumping claim. The Deputy Prime Minister Grant Robertson and Leader of the House Chris Hipkins says they are not aware of any such move. An economist says the Reserve Bank has an easy decision to make, but it's one that'll be tough for mortgage holders. Annual inflation has dropped just 0.1%, while consumer prices rose 2.2% in the last quarter. Brad Olson expects the Reserve Bank will have to increase the official cash rate by 75 points next month to drive down inflation, but it'll drive up mortgages.
We're talking thousands, if not tens of thousands, more for for some people's mortgages. That's a huge amount of cash that they're going to have to find. But it is unfortunately the realistic way that the Reserve Bank is going to get inflation under control is to very heavily hit the economy to try and bring the level of demand that we're seeing out there at the moment back down a bit more to where we're able to supply, because the disruptions from COVID are still so intense.
Brad Olson says a 75-point rise is unprecedented and shows the scale of the Reserve Bank's task. Auckland's Mayor has written to the chair of the Ports of Auckland, saying the company has not been serving residents well. In an open letter, Mayor Wayne Brown says the port has not operated as a successful business, citing problems such as a failed multi-million-dollar automation project and work deaths. He went on to say it stops Aucklanders from fully enjoying the harbour. Ports of Auckland is the third council-controlled organisation targeted by the new mayor. The government has committed to holding an inquiry into its response for the COVID-19 pandemic. It comes as harsher measures such as vaccine mandates, the MIQ system and lockdowns are scrapped. Opposition parties have been calling for a COVID-19 inquiry for months. Acting COVID-19 Minister Chris Hipkins says the government held off on an inquiry so those working on the front lines could take part. The owners of Whakaari White Island will face charges relating to the deaths of 22 people during the 2019 eruption. The Buttle family had its application for dismissal thrown out in the Auckland District Court today. Judge Evangelos Thomas says the evidence provided by the three brothers and directors who own the island fell well short of establishing any bad faith or improper motive on the part of WorkSafe. The trial is set to take place in 9 months. A pilot involved in the rescue of 2 people from a remote Otago beach says water was already up to their knees when they were winched to safety. Emergency services responded to the crash on Beach Road, north of the coastal town of Kakanui, at about 9:30 last night. Despite the car plummeting 7 metres off a cliff, the driver had only minor injuries and the passenger was uninjured. Otago Regional Rescue Helicopter Chief Pilot Graham Gale says the pair were extremely lucky.
Everyone was pretty relieved. Yes, they'd had a bad situation, but it could have been a whole lot worse than what it actually was. And I would probably go as far as go and take a lotto ticket this week. I reckon it would be worthwhile.
Graham Gale says the pair were pleased to see their rescuers as the tide was coming in. It's 5:04. In sport, football's world governing body FIFA is confident Auckland's Eden Park will sell out for the opening game of next year's Women's Football World Cup, and that all the ticket holders will show up. The opening match of the Rugby World Cup this month was sold out, but 6,000 fans were no-shows. FIFA's top brass are in the country inspecting facilities for the tournament, which will be held in New Zealand and Australia in July and August. FIFA's chief women's football officer, New Zealander Sarai Barrowman, expects the match between the football ferns and a yet-to-be-determined opponent will be an ideal kick-off for the tournament.
You will regret it, basically, if you're not part of it and you don't come. And you don't want to be that person looking back in 5 or 10 years' time wishing that you were part of it, that you were at a stadium or that you were somehow involved in it.
The Cup draw takes place in Auckland on Saturday. Former All Blacks coach John Mitchell and former Hurricanes loose Brad Shields are among 167 players and staff who've been made redundant at the English rugby club Wasps, with the Coventry club going into administration. Australia Test cricket skipper Pat Cummins will take on the captaincy of Australia's one-day international men's side after Aaron Finch stepped down. And former Boston Red Sox and Minnesota Twins shortstop Sue Wei Lin has signed with the Auckland Tuatara for the upcoming Australian Baseball League season. That's the news.
A crisis in hospital emergency departments.
I was speaking with a night shift doctor who finished work at 7 o'clock this morning. He had 10 people walk out. He had a 6-hour wait.
And admission there is a problem by the minister.
We know that the system still remains under pressure.
So is the solution supersizing our acute wards?
One could say that the solution to constipation isn't a bigger colon. We need some increase in size in ED, but it's the hospital that needs to have more beds, more staff.
Factual news fast. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
On air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. Rowan Quinn is here next with Checkpoint. That's after the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. For Northland to Kapiti, including Coromandel and the Central High Country, long fine spells, isolated showers developing this afternoon. Bay of Plenty, fine. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered showers, possibly heavy with evening thunderstorms, clearing tonight. Fine tomorrow, but a few afternoon and evening showers inland. For Wellington, Wairarapa and Nelson, mainly fine, a few showers in Wellington and Wairarapa this evening, possibly thundery with hail, clearing in the morning. Marlborough and Canterbury, showers spreading north this afternoon, possibly heavy with isolated thunderstorms and hail, clearing in the evening, fine with high cloud tomorrow. Bulla to Fiordland, also Otago and Southland. Showers clearing from Westland and Otago this afternoon and evening. Rain spreading north tomorrow afternoon and evening with hail and possible thunderstorms in Fiordland. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy with showers this afternoon and evening. It's 5:07.
Thanks, Karen. Kia ora, this is Checkpoint. I'm Rowan Quinn. A shocker, to put it politely. That's the assessment from Kiwi Bank economists to the biggest domestic inflation rise since records began. Surging food and household costs have kept inflation close to a 32-year high. Veggie prices increased 24% in the last quarter. Grant Robertson says inflation is easing amid a volatile global environment and is still pointing to international factors like the war in Ukraine. The problem for the Finance Minister is domestic inflation is still high and rising. That's for things like rents and construction costs. Petrol prices are coming down, but their dip has been offset by an increase in almost everything else. And it all means more hikes to interest rates are coming, putting more pressure on household budgets. Our political reporter Giles Dexter has more.
All right, let's get the numbers out of the way. First, here's the good news. Our annual inflation is down to 7.2%. Here's the bad news. It's barely moved, only down 0.1%.
Inflation has eased slightly on an annual basis relative to the rest of the world. New Zealand continues to be in a reasonably good position, but that doesn't stop it being hard for households.
And here's the really bad news. It's up 2.2% from the last quarter. Vegetable prices are up a whopping 24%. Domestic inflation, that's the stuff that isn't impacted by international factors, is trending in the wrong direction and at its highest level since records began. It's an ugly set of figures. Here's Nicola Groden from Stats NZ.
Overall, we had 66% of our items that we price are showing increases in the September quarter.
Poor weather hasn't exactly helped the household staples, and Kiwis are feeling the burn.
It's getting harder to feed a family of 5 and be healthy.
I noticed a lot of produce has been going up quite a lot, but overall it's just kind of really been everything.
Fruit and veg, yeah, that's really expensive. And I just think it's really unaffordable for a lot of people now, which is very sad.
Infometrics principal economist Brad Olsen says it's clear inflation isn't under control yet.
No matter if it's the government's fault, if it's the international sector's fault, whoever's it is, New Zealanders at home do not give a damn over whose fault inflation is. They just know that their own household costs are going up intensely, and whoever has power needs to get that under control.
He says the Reserve Bank will need to hike the OCR in a big way next month, 75 basis points to 4.25%. That'll be a bitter pill to swallow for mortgage owners.
We're talking thousands, if not tens of thousands more for for some people's mortgages. That's a huge amount of cash that they're going to have to find. But it is unfortunately the realistic way that the Reserve Bank is going to get inflation under control is to very heavily hit the economy to try and bring the level of demand that we're seeing out there at the moment back down a bit more to where we're able to supply, because the disruptions from COVID are still so intense.
National says it all makes a mockery of the government's claims of a strong economy.
There's no plan to manage inflation at the moment. We have no economic plan to manage inflation, and it is hurting and causing huge pain and suffering to Kiwis.
But the government says it is doing its best to weather the storm. The Finance Minister had hoped inflation had passed its peak, but he believes any further falls won't be quite so tiny.
On the building supplies, we're definitely seeing the costs of that easing in terms of shipping costs. And labour supply, we're now seeing tens of thousands of positions approved via the new visa check system, and I think we'll start to see some of those things ease in the near term.
He says there'll be some pretty tough decisions to make in next year's budget to get spending down, but he's reiterated there won't be any kind of tax reform.
There's Charles Dexter reporting there, and we're keen for your feedback on that one. How are you most keenly feeling the inflation increases? Veggies, rent, building costs? Let us know. Text us on 2101. It's now 5:11 and you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Independent MP Gaurav Sharma has resigned from Parliament, forcing a by-election in Hamilton West. The former Labour MP says he intends to stand in the by-election as an independent candidate. Labour leader Jacinda Ardern is describing the move as unnecessary and wasteful. Well, for more on this, we're joined now by our political reporter Katie Scotcher. Kia ora, Katie.
Kia ora, Rowan.
What has Gaurav Sharma said this afternoon?
Yeah, it's been quite a dramatic afternoon here at Parliament. At the end of question time, Gaurav Sharma made quite a lengthy post on social media announcing that he is resigning. Now, he says that he reached that decision over the weekend after being told by New Zealand council members, that's the Labour Party's governing body, that Labour's next step was to remove him as an MP using the Waka jumping legislation. But he says their plan was to do this 6 months before next year's general election to avoid a by-election in Hamilton West. Now, he wouldn't tell us who told him that information, and he had no evidence to back up that claim. Now, he says that to preempt that move from Labour, he's resigning, and today is his last day. His resignation will, of course, prompt a by-election in the Hamilton West electorate, and he says that he plans to run in that by-election as an independent candidate. But he says he'll also be launching his own political party, which he currently doesn't have a name for, and he says that that party, which will be centrist, will contest the 2023 election.
And Katie, any response from Labour leader Jacinda Ardern on this one?
Yeah, so shortly after Gaurav Sharma posted his statement on Facebook, we got a statement from Jacinda Ardern. She says that Labour has not and is not considering using the Waka jumping provisions to boot Gaurav Sharma from Parliament. We also heard from senior Labour ministers Grant Robertson and Chris Hipkins. Both reiterated that and said that they were unaware of any discussion about using the Waka jumping provision. Jacinda Ardern says Gaurav Sharma may wish to reconsider his decision to resign, given he is, quote, unnecessarily costing the taxpayer hundreds of thousands of dollars to trigger a by-election he then intends to stand in. She went on to say that she considers the by-election unnecessary and wasteful, given the general election is only scheduled for next year. Dr. Sharma, we put all of this to him. He said that he has no intention of changing his mind. He still plans to resign. Today's his last day, and he says that he's adamant that Labour was planning to use the Waka jumping provision to boot him from Parliament.
So, Katie, has he actually been expelled from the Labour Party?
Yeah, so that was something that he touched on in his Facebook post. He said that a Labour Party panel last week recommended to the New Zealand councils, again the governing body of the Labour Party, that he be expelled from the party as a member. Now, if we cast our minds back to the end of August when Dr. Sharma was expelled from the Labour Party caucus, the caucus also agreed to refer the matter to the Labour Party to consider if it was necessary that any further action should be taken. Shortly after that, the New Zealand Council had to decide whether or not to investigate that referral, that complaint. Now, the rest of the process has really been held behind closed doors, but I am told that the process is still ongoing and that no final decision on Dr. Sharma's future as a member of Labour Party has been decided.
Well, look, thanks very much for that update. That's Katie Scotcher, our political reporter in Wellington. No big city hospitals are meeting their target for treating emergency department patients within 6 hours. A report out yesterday into Middlemore Hospital described the ED as dysfunctional, overcrowded and unsafe. It was looking into the circumstances of a woman who left the overcrowded ED without being seen and later died of a brain hemorrhage. Last night, the chair of the College of Emergency Medicine, Kate Allen, told us the issues at Middlemore are being seen at other hospitals too. Health Minister Andrew Little told me there's a lot of stress on the system.
We have a lot of emergency departments. There's variability about their performance against that standard. And I think what is true to say is that the performance against that standard has deteriorated for some time. And that reflects just the pressure on the system at the moment and the number of vacancies. But look, it is quite a wide variety of numbers depending on which ED you're talking about.
Well, where are you seeing the biggest pressures there? There's Middlemore, obviously. What other hospitals are also at the lower end of seeing that many patients in the correct amount of time?
Well, I mean, a lot of EDs. Just trying to pull the figures up. So I've got them in front of me. So if I look at just going through the figures in front of me. Dunedin is 58 or just over 58%. I think probably Waikato is one that is the lowest against the standard. It's just under 47%. And you've got Palmerston North is just over 47%. Then you've got others. You've got the smaller hospitals. You've got Rotorua over 90%. You've got, I think, Tairāwhiti and Gisborne does reasonably well. Timaru does reasonably well. In terms of bigger hospitals, Waitakere is at 77.5%. So yeah, just a Whangarei is at 75%. Just a variety across there, but it's not at the 95%.
Well, 47 and 48% for Waikato and Palmerston North hospitals. You'd have to be worried if you were living there, wouldn't you?
No, I wouldn't be worried about going to ED. You will get seen and treated in ED, but the wait time will be longer. That's, I think, the trade-off there, and as those hospitals are dealing with the level of demand they've got and then managing vacancies. And look, these are up and down. We're coming out of the back of, as I say, a pretty tough winter for the health system generally and for most hospitals. And so I would expect to see some improvement in those numbers. But really, the challenge is not just about EDs. It is about primary and community care, and it is about aged residential care. So addressing the workforce challenges in each of those areas is just as important if we're going to reduce the wait times in emergency departments.
Yeah, I'll ask you about that. I'm wondering, are there any of the big city hospitals that are meeting that target of seeing 95% of their patients in ED within 6 hours?
Well, none of the big city hospitals are, no.
And is that something, how do you feel about that?
Well, that measure is there for a good reason, because it is an indication of, it's not just an indication of what's happening in EDs and the pressures on ED, it's often a measure about what's happening in the rest of the hospital. One of the reasons why people get held up in ED is because there aren't enough beds in the rest of the hospital, problem of bed block. Sometimes that's because there are issues about discharging people who don't need to be in hospital, but there's nowhere else for them to go. And that's the issue about aged residential care often. In some respects, it's also about who's around to make discharge decisions and the protocols that some hospitals have to make discharge decisions. In terms of primary care, one of the reasons why a lot more people turn up to ED is because they can't get access to a GP or a community clinic, or at least to get access at the time they want, often after hours, and so they turn up to ED. So that's why, as I said before, what we do in primary care and aged residential care is as much about having an impact on what is happening in ED.
And you've mentioned about how there's a need for huge, big system changes to improve this. But what if you're a patient that's turning up to an ED tomorrow? Is there anything that can be done in the short term to ensure that you'll be safe?
You will be safe, and the advice I guess I would have is that if you are in an ED and you are feeling unwell and uncomfortable about going home, do not go home. Stay there, and you might be waiting a little longer, but you will be in the right place. If you do suddenly deteriorate, you are in the best place you can be, and the staff will see that. But in terms of addressing the challenges we've got, particularly the workforce challenges, I've just been meeting with the Nursing Council, looking at what they're doing and the contribution they're making. They are meeting with Te Whatu Ora Health New Zealand and the Immigration Department about all the issues that can be addressed to improve getting registrations more quickly and what have you. And then there's the recruitment effort that Te Whatu Ora is putting in. So I am weekly looking at what is happening and what is being done to fill the vacancies in the system that we've got. When we talk about vacancies, these are funded positions, so it's not as if the funding isn't there for them, it's to getting the warm bodies into those positions, and that's where the effort has to go.
It's 21 minutes past 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora, e te iwi. Coming up, we look into how rent increases are driving up inflation. Don't forget you can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Now it's time for the headlines with Karen.
Thanks, Rowan. The Deputy Prime Minister says Gaurav Sharma's claim the Labour Party was planning to oust him from Parliament through the waka-jumping legislation is false. The independent MP resigned this afternoon, saying he'll launch a new centrist party to contest the by-election in Hamilton West. Economist Brad Olsen expects the Reserve Bank will increase the official cash rate by 75 points next month to drive down inflation. Annual inflation has dropped just 0.1%, while consumer prices rose 2.2% in the last quarter. Auckland's mayor has written an open letter to the ports of Auckland saying the company has not been serving residents well. Wayne Brown says the port has not operated as a successful business, citing a failed automation project and workplace deaths. The government has committed to holding an inquiry into its response to the COVID-19 pandemic. It says another lockdown is highly unlikely and it has scrapped vaccine mandates and MIQ, but will retain 7-day isolation and mask wearing in healthcare settings. The owners of Whakaari White Island will face trial in 9 months relating to the deaths of 22 people during the 2019 volcanic eruption. The Buttle family's application for dismissal was thrown out in the Auckland District Court today. Judge Evangelist Thomas says the evidence provided by the three brothers fell well short of establishing any bad faith or improper motive on the part of WorkSafe. On the traffic front tonight, expect quite a few closures across Auckland's motorway network tonight, including a full closure of northbound lanes on State Highway 1 between Silverdale and Puhoi. That's as maintenance work continues. South of Auckland City, barrier removal works will close State Highway 1 at Hampton Downs tonight from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. between Hampton Down and the Te Kawhata interchange heading southbound. And in Waikato Bay of Plenty, maintenance work will see State Highway 2 closed between Paeroa and Waihi, that's the Karangahake Gorge, tonight, Wednesday and Thursday nights between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. We'll have more news headlines and any traffic updates around 20 to 6.
Thanks, Karen. Well, the draw for the biggest women's sports event in the world, the 2023 Football World Cup, takes place in Auckland this week, which means some of football's top brass are here to check out the facilities that will be used for the tournament that New Zealand's co-hosting with Australia. We'll be joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. Why is the draw so important, Felicity?
Hi, Rowan. Well, the draw is super important because not only do we find out who the football ferns are going to be playing in Group A, but also we find out who their opposition will be when that Eden opener at Eden Park on July 20 next year. Also, we already knew that the football ferns would be playing all of their games in New Zealand and the Matildas would be playing all of theirs in Australia. But it also opens up the way for those 27 other teams that have already qualified. There are 3 more to qualify, but we find out what their pathway to the trophy is going to look like. So for some of them, that means that they'll be playing in Auckland, Wellington, Hamilton or Dunedin. So it gives fans a little bit of a chance to find out maybe who they could pop out and support in their local area. And for that opening game, it's a Thursday. So the tournament organisers, like this Rugby World Cup that we've just having on at the moment, they got to sell out for that first game. Organisers of the Football World Cup are expecting the same thing. But as I say, it's a Thursday. That's quite an ambitious target to be making. But across this tournament and across 64 games across 2 countries, they're hoping to get more than 1 million people in. So that just gives the clarity around how big this tournament is. In a football world tournament, Football World Cups, they're massive in football. Yeah. The kick-off times for this haven't actually been released yet either, so after the draw we'll find that out. Organisers today were telling me that they take into consideration things like this tournament's going to be in the middle of winter, so they want a time that's friendly for fans in the stands. But also because it's such a global tournament, it's actually getting across broadcast times for each of the teams playing in each of the matches. That type of thing's taken into consideration as well.
Oh, it's a real juggling act, isn't it? And are there any teams that would be a real coup to be for New Zealand to be hosting?
Oh, the head of FIFA women's competition, Sarai Bierman, she's actually a New Zealander. So today she's probably supposed to be a little bit neutral, but today she was saying that she hopes that some of the big names, so that's the likes of 4-time world champions and world number 1, USA, would get here. They'd bring with them the likes of Megan Rapinoe, one of the biggest, most recognisable faces in women's football, also the England Lionesses. They are in back of their Euro 2022 win. They've got a massive following. So having teams like that here, or in the true Kiwi tradition of backing an underdog, there are 5 teams on debut. So that would be the likes of Morocco or Zambia. Maybe we'd want to get them in New Zealand as well.
And just we'll talk a little bit about tennis. Felicity, the ASB Classic signed another young gun for next year's tournament.
That's right, Danish teenager Holger Rune. He'll be coming here. This will actually be his second time in Auckland. He played his first ATP tournament as a professional in 2020 here, but he'll be back in it. He's only 19, so it's following the likes of what the tournament directors are after, is finding those really rising stars to come to this tournament, which is seen as a bit of a warm-up to the Australian Open. So he joins in the top 10. Cameron Norrie and Casper Ruud are 2 other players that have already signed up. So it's some big names that are actually getting selected for this tournament. And actually, Rene will bring with him his new coach. Since he was last here, he's had a little bit of a coaching shake-up, and we might know this person better as Serena Williams' coach, Patrick Mouratoglou. So he's been out here before as well. So another chance to see someone like that in the stands as well.
Well, lots of exciting sporting action coming up next year. Thank you very much for that. It's Felicity Reid, our sports reporter there. Well, returning to our earlier story, housing is a key factor driving up inflation. The latest Consumer Price Index shows rental prices had an annual increase of 4.6% in the September quarter. Rents are already at record highs around the country. Joining us now is Rented United spokesperson Ashok Jacob. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
What are renters out there telling you about how they're faring at the moment?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, I think the thing that I would say is that the current cost of living crisis that's affecting people in New Zealand is not really a surprise to people who've been renting for a long period of time, because the Stats New Zealand data says that rental price inflation has been increasing beyond wage growth since at least 2002. And we had a couple years, it's easing now, thankfully, but we had a couple years where rental prices were going up across the board on an average of between 5 and 10%, and wages were, especially at the bottom end of the spectrum, which is where a lot of renters lie, but we're not going up nearly that much. So this is something that renters have been facing for a long time, and I'm glad to see that Stats is recognising it as a key driver of the cost of living crisis.
And are you seeing with things like, food prices and petrol prices going up as well, that people are having to, make a decision about where to put their money, about whether to pay the rent or some of those other key bills or needs?
Yeah, and this is unfortunately something that's been affecting renters for a long time. I mean, as I said before, renters tend to be clustered at the bottom end of the income scale, and while rent prices increase beyond wages and beyond what mortgage prices go up, I mean, we had a period over the last 10 years or so where it was the cheapest it's ever been to own a property. But during that same period, we had rent prices going up every year of between 5 and 10%. So people have been making those tough decisions for a long time now, especially low-income renters. And unfortunately, we don't see that really ending anytime soon.
With the new rules that landlords can only increase their rent once a year, is that causing sort of more of a spike in rental prices?
I mean, it's difficult to tell, because the data that the government collects is, if I'm going to be honest, is by no means good enough. For a long time, Tenancy Services and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development have relied on data provided by TradeMe to determine what the actual rental price index is. And the TradeMe data is very unreliable, because firstly, they only collect data as to what rentals are being listed on TradeMe, not necessarily what people end up paying. And the data that MP holds is only representative of bonds being lodged, and most rent increases don't come with a new bond being lodged. And so, unfortunately, it's kind of difficult to tell. But yeah, I mean, the situation is very serious, and it has been for a long time.
Well, thanks for joining us tonight. There's Ashog Jacob, who is the Renters United spokesperson. And it's 5:31 here on Checkpoint on RNZ National. Time for the business news now with Nona Peltier. And we're going to talk more about inflation, Nona. That third quarter much higher than expected. What does that mean? Can you tell us more for businesses and consumers?
It's interesting. Quite a few people have asked me recently, what is all this inflation talk about? And it's really quite a basic thing, really. I mean, inflation is prices that are rising following demand. So the issue isn't whether or not inflation is good or bad. A little bit of inflation is considered to be a positive for the economy, because it creates expectations that prices won't fall. But the problem with high inflation is the expectations that prices will continue to rise. And it's the expectations that people have around inflation that are the worst problem for New Zealand right now, because we've got a very tight labour market. So if your food price and 4.1% increase in the quarter, if your food prices are up that much in 3 months, you might be looking for a wage increase. And that puts pressure on businesses to give you that wage increase. But those costs aren't necessarily absorbed by businesses, and especially in an environment where there's expectations of inflation and prices rising, all they'll do is just pass those costs on to consumers. So it becomes a vicious cycle. So the Reserve Bank of New Zealand is really going to have to jump on top of it. Whereas we went hard and early, we know that we were one of the first central banks in the world to raise interest rates. It isn't enough. It looks like we're going to have to go a lot harder than we already have. That's a terrible position to be in for people who are struggling already with high costs and so forth. So for consumers, it does mean that prices will continue to increase. Certainly interest rate costs will go up. Those costs will be passed on to consumers for sure. And yeah, until we can get on top of this, it could go on for well into next year.
It's very depressing, Nona. A little bit of other news, perhaps. The Ryman retirement village operator, Ryman Healthcare, now they're going to use timber rather than concrete and steel for their Christchurch developments.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, it has to do with inflation as well, of course, yes. Because, two reasons. One, supply, which is the supply of steel and concrete, expected to be in very short supply in Christchurch when the stadium gets underway in terms of the construction of that at the end of this year. So they're going to use a lot of steel, a lot of concrete into the construction of that particular facility. And Ryman is anticipating shortages. So they've said, okay, we're going to go with timber this time. And that's why. There you go.
Very interesting. Thank you so much. That's our business reporter.
No, you need to tell me
the
I need
markets.
to. Yeah,
I need to ask you about the markets. What's happening there?
I tell you, some things did happen as a result of the change in CPI. So, for example, the dollar, it rose more than 0.5% to 56.9, which is a cent. That's US cents, better than it was yesterday. 90.02 Australian, so we haven't been in the 90 area for a while. And 49.9 British pence, so just knocking on the door there of 50. So definitely a stronger day for the currency. And the markets themselves were more positive, and that's because overall people are a little bit more interested in riskier assets like equities. And so we rose more than 0.5%. That was a gain of 61 points to 10,847.
Thank you for sticking around to tell us that. Thanks. That's Nona Peltier, our business reporter. Well, the government's standing firm on its Three Waters proposal despite plans from Auckland's mayor to try to flush the plan away. Wayne Brown has sent a letter to Watercare telling the organisation to stop spending its resources on preparations for the reforms. Our reporter Felix Walton has more.
Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown has called the Three Waters reform a doomed proposal, and he wants to pull the plug on any money being spent on planning for it. Local Government Minister Nanaia Mahuta says the government's plan will bring down Aucklanders' rates in the long term.
Having a solution around water's infrastructure to reduce the cost impost on ratepayers, I would have thought would have been a positive.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is expected to meet Wayne Brown this week and hopes the pair can find some common ground on the divisive issue.
Look, I would hope that there are some areas of shared ambition and shared concern. Big focus for the government, for instance, is making sure that we don't have significant rates increases because we have not managed water infrastructure.
Auckland University environmental engineering professor Dr. Lokesh Pathi says maintaining the status quo isn't an option. He says other countries are far ahead of New Zealand in terms of water infrastructure.
It's based on some of the facts which are quite evident for anyone working in the water industry, and that is that our wastewater infrastructure is clearly lagging behind. We have a number of issues on drinking water, wastewater and stormwater.
He says the lack of reforms is causing Auckland's rates to increase.
We are seeing our water bills going up. And that's primarily because some of the advanced treatments that they had to install for treating more polluted water. So things like that adds up the cost.
Former liaison officer for Watercare, Linda Cooper, opposes the plan but disapproves of Wayne Brown's approach. She says at the end of the day, the mayor won't have a choice.
It's clickbait policy. It's sort of playing to the angry crowd. And I think that when you are in local government, legislation trumps everything. If the minister says you do this, you do it.
The Prime Minister says the Three Waters reform is in Aucklanders' best interests.
The modelling shows that without this water reform, Auckland ratepayers will pay more. I would hope that would be a shared ambition to prevent that.
Something she'll be keen to impress on the new mayor when she meets him on Thursday.
And Wayne Brown was unavailable for an interview tonight, but in a statement says he has no intention of getting into a tit-for-tat with the minister, but says Nanaia Mahuta is wrong. Wayne Brown says the current Three Waters proposal would increase costs for Auckland households and reduce services for Auckland and Northland households. Well, time for a little bit of your feedback now on our interview with Andrew Little. One texter says, so I should drive from Hamilton to Tokoroa or Rotorua and I'll be seen faster. This is on emergency wait times. Another texter says, when will Andrew Little take responsibility for the state of the health system? Another one says, I oppose the use of targets. That's 6-hour targets to be seen by emergency departments, and the targets set everybody up to fail. That's from Gary. And another texter says Andrew Little could just pay the nurses a competitive rate to retain staff. And then some more feedback from someone who says they're a brain injury sufferer and they left ED recently, and lucky it turned out not to be more serious. They hadn't wanted to wait there. They said the hours-long wait is virtually impossible for some people like me. Well, it is just coming up to 20 to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora e te iwi. If you have more feedback like we've just read there, you can text us on 2101 and you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Now it's time for the headlines with Karen.
Independent MP Gaurav Sharma says he'll contest the Hamilton West by-election triggered by his snap resignation from Parliament. He claims Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is planning to invoke the waka jumping legislation before the next election to ensure there's no need for a by-election. But Ms Ardern denies this and says Dr Sharma may wish to reconsider as his decision is costing the taxpayer hundreds of thousands of dollars. An economist says the strength and breadth of domestic price rises suggests inflation could be stronger for longer. Consumer prices rose 2.2% in the September quarter, and the annual rate slowed just slightly to 7.2%. Prices have been driven by higher food and household costs and airfares, with domestically generated rises the strongest in 20 years. A fast food worker who wants the Fair Pay Agreements bill passed says he lives hand-to-mouth despite working full-time. The bill, which provides for collective bargaining across industries, is having its second reading in Parliament today. Worker Henry Stevenson says it's mentally and physically exhausting trying to make a living in hospitality. The Public Service Financial Watchdog wants a review into the government's efforts on the environment. A new report from the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment says the government is avoiding scrutiny because data is flawed or hard to get. Auditor General John Ryan backs the report and says a review will help build trust and transparency. Those are the headlines. In traffic news, quite a few closures across Auckland's motorway network tonight, including a full closure of northbound lanes on State Highway 1 between Silverdale and Puhoi for maintenance work. Barrier removal works will close State Highway 1 south of Auckland at Hampton Downs tonight overnight. That's between Hampton Down and the Te Kawhata interchange heading southbound. And maintenance will see State Highway 2 closed in Waikato Bay of Plenty between Paeroa and Waihi. That's the Kalangahake Gorge tonight, Wednesday and Thursday nights between 8 p.m. and 5 p.m. It's 19 to 6.
Thanks, Karen. The local body elections saw a change of guard in many of the country's councils. At the same time, in West Auckland, residents have voted for new representatives on their liquor licensing trusts that have been in effect since 1972. As the final results came through at the end of last week, 10 of the 17 trustees on the Portage and Waitakere licensing trusts were fresh faces. A group opposed to the trust's monopoly over West Auckland's liquor sales has claimed 4 of those seats and hopes to enact change from the inside. Reporter Tom Taylor and video journalist Nick Munro went to find out why.
On the streets of Avondale, people have mixed views on the West Auckland licensing trusts.
I know the trusts set the prices, but the money that they made is also used towards other groups around here.
I'm glad that they exist. I'm not too sure how well they're managed. I voted based on just like reading the little bios and what resonated with me, but I'm not as well informed as I would like to be about them.
They give us a little gift usually every year. You know, I've had some very useful things from them, you know, tools and first aid kits and things like that.
But while some are pleased with the money the trusts return to the community through grants and sponsorships, they'd prefer to do their alcohol shopping in a neighbouring suburb just outside the trust's jurisdiction.
It's probably just as well. People can always drive down the road to Mount Albert anyway. I don't use liquor out west, basically, at all.
The West Auckland trusts are made up of the Portage and Waitakere licensing trusts. For the last 50 years, from Avondale and Blockhouse Bay through to Whatipu and Te Henga, they have held a near monopoly over liquor stores, pubs and taverns, with only specialised retailers like breweries allowed to operate independently. It means that unlike the rest of Auckland, residents of West Auckland can't buy alcohol at their local supermarket, and if they're going out for a drink, chances are it's being poured by a trust's employee. But in the recent local government elections, a group opposed to this monopoly have gained some seats at the table.
We've got 4 now, so 2 on the Portage and 2 on Waitakere. So that's doubling from the last term, which is fantastic. We stood 7 candidates, so to get 4 through, we're pretty stoked with, and I think it does reflect that there is an appetite for change.
Amanda Roberts is one of the new elected members on the Waitakere Licensing Trust, gaining the most votes in the ward of Te Atatu. She joins the West Auckland Licensing Trust's Action Group, or WALTAG, after moving to the area and being confronted with a lack of options in both the hospitality and retail sector.
For me personally, it involved kind of walking around the supermarket for a wee while, kind of looking for where the wine and beer was and going, oh, okay, right, we're in an area where that's not available in the supermarkets.
Roberts says she'll be focused on giving more of the trust's surplus profits back to the community, although she won't give a definite percentage until she learns more about the operations behind the scenes. She'll also be pushing for more competition through a referendum on the trust's monopoly of alcohol sales, the most recent one having taken place in 2003. There are only a handful of non-trust liquor stores able to operate in West Auckland. Te Atatu's Wine Villa is one of them, being established before the trusts themselves. However, its licence is very restricted and only allows it to sell wine. Last year, a WALTAG petition to hold a referendum on the monopoly in the Waitakere Licensing Trust's area fell narrowly short of the required 15% of residents. But the Trust's Chief Executive Officer, Alan Pollard, says it made the board pay attention.
We listened to the community in November. The petition, it was 934 votes. That really made us all sit up and take notice.
Before Mr Pollard joined the trusts in 2020, the group had repeatedly refused to release its financial statements, drawing the ire of WALTAG, which called for increased transparency. The trust still has no benchmark when it comes to the proportion of its profits to be returned to the community, although Mr Pollard says $7 million has been given back since 2019.
We decide annually really how much we're going to give back to the community, but not as a percentage. It is something we've talked about. But again, you're running a commercial business, and what are some, pretty interesting times. So we just have to be careful as well about, the money we're giving away. It's sustainable.
Mr Pollard says the trusts need to be careful with the distribution of surplus profits while they plan redevelopments of many of their hospitality venues.
Well, community members in Gisborne are kicking off a grassroots movement to try to stop a surge in gang warfare. There's been gunshots, house fires and extra police on guard in the city over recent weeks. The group's demanding social services work better together to try to stop desperation leading to crime. Our Tairāwhiti reporter Tom Kitchen has more.
On a busy suburban street in Tūranganuiakiwa, a group is hunkered down in a small shop. It's a spot about a minute's drive from where women were killed earlier this year and where, just weeks ago, children were shot and injured. This group is a true cross-section of the community. The likes of police, staff from agencies such as Kāinga Order and MSD, gang whānau and church pastors. It is a brainchild of local social advocate Tuta Ngārimu, who's outraged at this year's surge in violence.
We're losing people, are getting shot, people are dying here. What's happened is someone's got shot, someone's got arrested, a family's left in trauma. Life carries on. Then someone else gets shot, someone goes to jail, family in trauma again.
He's concerned about the escalation in recent weeks.
All the shooting kids. And I thought, hey, nah, we've got to make a stand here. Otherwise the pattern's heading towards normalising this kind of behaviour in our community.
Tuta Ngārimu brought this group together after a recent rally. He says there's a lot of discontent around social service providers.
Every kind of organisation that we've brought to the table now, they're all working in silos. They've all got their 25-year strategic plan on how they're going to beautify this and that, but there's been no collaboration. So now that's why services fall over.
Hope Jones has come through emergency housing. She's at the hui because she's afraid for her tamariki.
I've got kids, and at this rate my kids will never be allowed to walk to the shop. My kids will never be allowed to walk to school if they're even still allowed to go to school.
The Tairāwhiti Police Area Commander, Inspector Sam Abrahama, is at the hui too. He's jotting down ideas while those around the room talk. He says one overarching term has come up, a community pathway for whānau.
We need to break that down and work out what that means, and we'll do that over the next week. And there'll be some actions in there around housing, around system barriers. There'll be some issues around employment.
Recently re-elected Mayor Biet Stoltz sits on the governance board of Manaaki Tairāwhiti, a group of local iwi and social service leaders tasked with changing how they work together. She says the services have to talk to each other. Gisborne's isolation means the cavalry ain't coming, but she admits sometimes things fall through the cracks.
Unfortunately, as is with any government organisation, sometimes information isn't shared in a timely way and there could be miscommunication there. But I think in the Tairāwhiti there's good communication between our iwi partners, council and other government organisations.
Tuta Ngārimu's Community Pathways Group, as they're calling it, is due to have its second hui today.
And it's just coming up to 10 to 6. Kia mau tonu mai, you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Lady of the Lake, Queenstown's Earnslaw, has celebrated 110 years since it first set sail, and its owners say it hasn't run out of steam yet. The TSS Earnslaw marked its birthday today with a cruise and a commitment to ditch coal in favour of a more sustainable fuel source. Tess Brunton joined the celebrations.
Local rangatahi braved a windy morning to send off the TSS Earnslaw on its 110th birthday cruise on Lake Whakatepu. The iconic vessel nearly didn't make it to the milestone. It was due to be scrapped in 1968. But Real NZ founders Les and Lady Olive Hutchins decided to buy and restore it. Granddaughter Madeline Peacock joined the family business while staying with them at age 14.
And my mother said to me that it's time I did my family duty, and I had to dress up as, I think it was Puff the Magic Dragon, or Pot the Magic Dragon, it was one or the other, and in this almighty big dragon suit, and that didn't fit me, and I had to walk around town with a basket of lollies and point to the Earnslaw, and I remember crashing into poles, losing my lollies.
She loves the feel and the sound of the Earnslaw and how it lists to one side depending on where everyone is standing. Generations of the Hutchins family joined the cruise along with supporters, celebrating with a special birthday cake and song. Grandson and skipper Ryan Hodges enjoys sharing the TSS Earnslaw with tourists each day.
I think people are just blown away when they actually realise just how many original parts there are on it, you know. Just the other day we were up showing some staff members actually up in the wheelhouse, and we're showing them the original compass, you know. The compass has got this little wee old kerosene lantern in there, you know, because the Earnslaw predates power.
Laurie has been on the TSS Earnslaw for nearly 18 years and was today's skipper.
This is a living, working bit of history, this ship, and long may it continue. Unfortunately, the company's committed to it, and Queenstown wouldn't be the same without the Earnslaw.
The steam-powered ship uses coal in its original 110-year-old boilers. Real NZ has been investigating different fuel sources to create steam more sustainably, narrowing its potential options to wood pellets, biofuel and hydrogen. Chief Executive Stephen England Hall says any commitment needs to stand the test of time and have a sustainable supply chain.
Because obviously we want to maintain the integrity of our Edwardian and Victorian technology and engineering and the steam system that runs those beautiful old steam engines. So what we're looking for is a change of heat, and of course heat generation can come from any source.
Stephen England Hall says a final decision is a few years away, with a couple more years needed to make it happen.
The Silver Scroll Awards are on tonight, recognising the country's best songwriters. It's the first full-scale ceremony since 2019, taking place at Auckland's Spark Arena. And Tony Stamp, music producer, joins us now. Hi, Tony.
Kia ora, Rowan.
So there's a bit of hint in the intro there, but can you tell us what the point of difference is about the Silver Scrolls?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you said, this is an award voted on by songwriters. So if you're a member of APRA AMCOS, which takes care of musical royalties, then you're able to vote. I think it's about 10,000 people vote on these awards. And so, yeah, the focus is on songwriting rather than, say, commercial success. The other big point of difference is that there's a different musical director each year. This year it's Rob and Sila Ruha, and they look after the musical performances. This is always a cover of one of the final 5 nominees' songs, and so you have Delaney Davidson covering Benny, for example, or the metal band Alien Weaponry covered Troy Kingi. Very interesting results come from that.
It'd be really fun to watch, actually, to be it.
It usually is.
Yeah. And so can you tell us, it's been COVID for a long time. Is this one of the biggest awards this year in terms of people turning up to them?
Absolutely. This year will be the country's biggest musical awards ceremony. There is no Aotearoa Music Awards this year. There will be winners, but there will be no ceremony. Whereas this year has taken a break the last few years and was online only. This year we're back at Spark Arena, a literal red carpet, seated, at tables. It's the full shebang.
Oh, it's exciting. And can you talk us through some of the nominees? And have you got any vibes on who you think could win?
Yeah, I'm always hesitant to play favourites, but I do have vibes. So I'll just whip through them. So Rob Ruha, who is the curator, he's also a nominee, along with Ka Ho, the musical youth group, with their song 35. It was a massive viral hit. Beyond the Stars by Tammy Nielsen, which she performed with none other than Willie Nelson, is up there. There's a Tuesday, a band from Christchurch who won the Smoke-Free Rock Quest. They've got a song called Girl at Night. It's also Troy Kingi and the Nudge, He Orete, and Marlon Williams with My Boy. Now, it's of note that 2 of those songs are completely sung in te reo Māori, which is an interesting note. But I will say, I'm really intrigued by There's a Tuesday, because they've only been a band for like 3 years, and definitely the youngest act there, and seem like a bit of an underdog. There's also the Maiaha Awards, which recognises Te Reo Waiata. So in there's Te Kahu, Ria Hall and Asia. And we also have the Sounds Contemporary Classical Award and Best Original Music for both TV and film.
Oh, it'll be interesting to see what happens there tonight. Thanks very much. It's Tony Stamp, music producer, joining us there. We're sticking with music, but this time it's a bit of K-pop. And South Korea's most famous group, BTS, is facing mandatory military service. The K-pop stars have sold 30 million albums and have had huge success around the world. But after much debate, the group has not been exempted from conscription. Here's the BBC's Richard Hamilton.
So watch me bring the fire, set the night light.
BTS are to South Korea what ABBA were to Sweden in the 1970s, one of their biggest global exports. They were the first non-English speaking act to perform sellout concerts at Wembley in London and the Rose Bowl in California. Time magazine listed them as among the 100 most influential people in the world, and they've addressed the United Nations and met President Biden at the White House. For months, fans have wondered whether South Korea's biggest pop idols would be conscripted. Another K-pop group, Big Band, had to be disbanded and changed their lineup when they responded to their call-up. Because the country is technically still at war with the North, military service is mandatory for all able-bodied men below the age of 30. But there are some exemptions: classical musicians and athletes, such as Olympic medal winners. BTS's financial success and their role as global ambassadors forced the government to change a law moving the maximum age from 28 to 30 to allow them more time to pursue their careers. It even triggered a debate in Parliament over whether pop stars should get the same treatment as their classical counterparts. But now the band's management company has ended the speculation. It released a statement saying the band's oldest member, Jin, will start military service at the end of the month and that the others will follow in due course.
In Paris, the auction of a small but perfectly formed dinosaur fossil is about to take place. Zephyr is 150 million year old remains. They were found in what's now Colorado. The BBC's Tim Ullman explains.
Meet Zephyr, the dinosaur who'll fit in your front room. Well, it would have to be quite a big front room, but as dinosaurs go, Zephyr is fairly diminutive. Part of the iguanodon family, it's no more than about 1.5 meters in height and around 3 meters in length. Small, but remarkable nonetheless.
The interesting thing about Zephyr is firstly its provenance, because it was found in one of the best fossil deposits in the United States. And then secondly, it's quite complete. We're talking about 70% of the skeleton.
This is what Zephyr may have looked like back in the day. Iguanodons date back from the late Jurassic to the early Cretaceous period and can be found in what is now Asia, Europe and North America. Dinosaur skeletons can go for big bucks at auction. This Tyrannosaurus Rex, called Stan, sold for $32 million 2 years ago. It's a growing and lucrative market.
There are different profiles of bidders. There are museums. Otherwise, it's individuals who are collectors. There's even investment funds that are linked to dinosaurs now.
Zephyr will go under the hammer on Thursday. A small dinosaur that may sell for a big price.
And a speedy bit of feedback from a property manager, Ben, on inflation. He says once a year rent increases are a major driver for rent. We all said so.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Karen McCarthy. The Deputy Prime Minister says Gaurav Sharma's claim the Labour Party was planning to oust him from Parliament through the waka jumping legislation is completely baseless. The independent MP resigned this afternoon, saying he intends on launching a new centrist party to contest the by-election he's triggered in Hamilton West. Dr Sharma, who was removed from Labour's caucus in August, claims his former party planned to use the waka jumping rule 6 months out from the general election to get rid of him and avoid triggering a by-election. Grant Robertson says this is news to him.
He's taken his own decision and that will trigger a by-election and we'll deal with that. But as far as I'm aware, that particular claim he's made has no basis whatsoever.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says Dr Sharma is unnecessarily costing the taxpayer hundreds of thousands of dollars by triggering a by-election he then intends to stand in. No big city hospitals are meeting their target for treating emergency department patients within 6 hours. A report out yesterday into Middlemore Hospital described the ED as dysfunctional, overcrowded and unsafe. It investigated the circumstances of a woman who left the overcrowded emergency department without being seen and later died of a brain hemorrhage. Health Minister Andrew Little has told Checkpoint there's a lot of stress on the system, but he says anyone turning up at ED will be safe.
The advice I guess I would have is that if you are in an ED and you are feeling unwell and uncomfortable about going home, do not go home. Stay there, and you might be waiting a little longer, but you will be in the right place. If you do suddenly deteriorate, you are in the best place you can be.
Andrew Little says he expects to see an improvement in ED numbers as we move out of winter. New Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown is standing by his claim that Three Waters reforms will increase rates, despite pushback from central government today. Minister of Local Government Nanaia Mahuta says the plan will cut rates in the long term, after Mr Brown asked Watercare to stop preparations for the reforms. A spokesperson for Mr Brown's office says he has no intention of getting into a tit-for-tat with the minister, but she is wrong. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is expected to meet with Mr Brown this week. The Buttle family will face charges relating to the deaths of 22 people in the 2019 Whakaari White Island eruption after their case was thrown out in the Auckland District Court today. Judge Evangelist Thomas says the evidence provided by the island's owners in their application for dismissal fell well short of establishing any bad faith or improper motive by WorkSafe. Jonty Dine has been following the case.
Whakaari Management Limited, owned by Andrew James and Peter Buddle, is charged with failing to understand the island's hazards or make sure there was a safe way to evacuate in the event of an eruption. The brothers argued that the charging documents they received did not convey the scope of the allegations they faced. However, Judge Evangelos Thomas declined the S147 application, ruling that the precedents cited by the brothers were insufficient to show an abuse of process. The trial is set to take place in 9 months.
Police are ramping up the installation of fog cannons, bollards and security cameras in retail stores. In May, then Police Minister Poto Williams announced a $6 million fund to help small business owners hit by ram raids. So far, 126 stores have been approached by retail crime prevention staff. 80 of those have completed a police assessment and 59 have been allocated to a supplier for equipment to be installed. A police spokesperson says it has committed over $260,000 for assessment and installation of equipment. In the UK, there is still speculation whether Liz Truss can survive as Prime Minister. She's been forced to tear up tax plans that triggered financial turmoil on the markets. It's now being called the biggest U-turn in British economic history. The BBC's Jonathan Blake reports.
After most of her programme for government was scrapped by the new Chancellor and Labour accused her of going into hiding, Liz Truss offered an apology. "I did make mistakes and I've been upfront and honest about that," the Prime Minister said. Her priority now was to ensure a stable economy. She again said she had gone too far and too fast in trying to cut taxes and help households pay their energy bills. But with so little of her policies left intact, that alone may not be enough to convince Tory backbenchers she can continue in office.
A fast food worker who wants the Fair Pay Agreements bill passed says he lives hand-to-mouth despite working full-time. The bill, which provides a framework for collective bargaining across industries, is having its second reading in Parliament today. Speaking at a union workers' gathering this afternoon, Henry Stevenson said it was mentally and physically exhausting trying to make a living in hospitality.
Those unexpected bills are anxiety-inducing. In fact, I'd say that life at the bottom of the economic rung is anxiety manifest. Long hours for long pay do not produce happy or productive members of our society.
Henry Stevenson says wages haven't kept up with the cost of living, businesses are dangerously understaffed and workers have a very real fear of burning out. Queenstown icon, the TSS Earnslaw, has celebrated 110 years since it first set sail on Lake Wakatipu. The tourist steamship marked its birthday today with a cruise and a commitment to ditch coal in favour of a more sustainable fuel source. Skipper Laurie says he was honoured to mark the occasion after nearly 18 years on the vessel. He says the Earnslaw is a living, working piece of history. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, our new technology program Tech Tent investigates how TikTok siphons off money from some of those most in need. Tony Stamp introduces us to new music with The Sampler, including Alex G's latest folk rock offering, and the wild swim doctor Mark Harper on the benefits of cold water swimming to help reduce inflammation, and why outdoor swimming should be considered as a public health measure. That's all on Nights with Karen Hay, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
A network funded through New Zealand On Air. We're on radio, rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. Back to Checkpoint with Rowan Quinn after the short forecast from Met Service to midnight on Wednesday. Northland to Kapiti, including Coromandel and the Central High Country. Long, fine spells, isolated showers developing this afternoon. Bay of Plenty, fine. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered showers, possibly heavy with evening thunderstorms clearing tonight. Fine tomorrow, but a few afternoon and evening showers inland. Wellington, Wairarapa and Nelson. Mainly fine, but a few showers in Wellington and Wairarapa this evening, possibly thundery with hail clearing tomorrow morning. Marlborough and Canterbury, showers spreading north this afternoon, possibly heavy with isolated thunderstorms and hail clearing in the evening, fine with high cloud tomorrow. Buller to Fiordland, also Otago and Southland. Showers clearing from Westland and Otago this afternoon and evening. Rain spreading north tomorrow afternoon and evening with hail and possible thunderstorms in Fiordland. Chatham Islands, cloudy with showers this afternoon and evening. It's 6:07.
No mai, hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, I'm Rowan Quinn. Those in the health sector say Middlemore's emergency department isn't the only one under serious pressure. A report's described Middlemore's ED as dysfunctional, overcrowded and unsafe. Earlier we spoke with the Minister of Health, Andrew Little, and joining us now is a representative for the Association of Salaried Medical Specialists. That's the Senior Doctors Union. Elspeth Frascatori is a senior emergency medical doctor. Kia ora, welcome.
Kia ora.
Now, Minister Little was telling us earlier that some hospitals in New Zealand are treating fewer than 50% of their patients within that 6 hours that they're in emergency departments. What does that kind of, I guess, clearance rate, for want of a better term, mean for patients?
Yeah, so I was really happy to hear Minister Little, acknowledge, that there is a problem right now. And, it's easy to hear these statistics. So what the target is saying is that emergency department patients will be staying in the emergency department longer than 6 hours. And that might be for the patients who are going home, who might be discharged at 8 hours or possibly even longer, or those that are being admitted to hospital, in which case they're, stuck in bed spaces in emergency departments rather than going to the wards. And that obviously has, a significant impact upon the onflow of patients. If you can imagine a bus and people who were not getting off the bus and just sat on the bus, then that bus couldn't carry people around the city, and it's just the same as that, but with the hospitals instead.
Is some of the patients waiting for that long? And we know there have been cases, fewer patients, but there are patients who have been waiting for 24 hours or more in ED. What's the experience of having to wait in an emergency department, say, as opposed to maybe moving into a ward?
The emergency department is a different type of environment. The patients who come to the emergency department are often sick. They're often being managed urgently. Some may have, substances on board, such as alcohol or drugs. Some may have a mental health crises, and some may just have something as simple as a broken ankle. So there's a really wide array of patients. But certainly, a ward-based environment is a far more relaxing place to be. And, you certainly do feel sorry for the patients who are spending multiple hours in emergency departments when you just know that they would be far happier if they were on a ward environment.
We're hearing that this is a system-wide problem, that EDs become clogged when they can't move patients out into wards. What would you like to see happen? Are there any things that can happen in the short term to make an immediate difference to what's happening?
This is a whole-of-system problem. This isn't a problem of emergency departments. What it is a kind of socialised healthcare system that's really struggling at the moment, and we're seeing it internationally. There are multiple solutions that are possibilities, and a lot of that comes down to resource, and a lot of that comes down to staff. Recruiting people into healthcare professions such as university grants and pay, and ensuring fair and equitable pay for staff. But a lot of this, it comes down to money. And there are some quick fixes, but it's just not as simple as that. And it involves really valuing your healthcare system and valuing, the health of the nation, and putting that as a really top priority. And a lot of that just comes down to funding, and it's not an easy problem to fix.
And as a doctor, working in a system where there are, all these patients building up in emergency departments, what's your biggest worry about the situation at the moment?
I worry, we're all humans, and I worry for I worry for the staff. It's a hard job at the moment, and we are seeing nurses moving off to the private sector, or people moving on to other professions, or people leaving for Australia. And obviously, we worry for our patients. We see our patients, and we want what's best for them. Anybody who comes to the emergency department, I can't stress this enough, will always be looked after and seen, and we really do want to provide good care, and we do. It's just that we cannot sometimes control that wait time, which is a major factor. If you're sat waiting to be seen in the emergency department for 6 hours, that's most of your day.
Well, thanks very much for joining us this evening. That's Elspeth Frascatori, who's a senior emergency medical doctor, talking to us there in her role with the Association of Salaried Medical Specialists, which is the senior doctors' union. Well, now to Australia, where there's more bad weather news for the east coast. Torrential rains expected to cause flooding from central Queensland to Tasmania this week. Parts of Brisbane, Sydney, Canberra and Melbourne are likely to be soaked by more than 50 millimetres of rain. In the Victorian town of Ethiopia, they're working day and night filling sandbags to keep two swollen rivers out of their town. The ABC's Oliver Gordon's there.
Hundreds of residents are preparing sandbags.
And we've been at this. We set this up at 8 o'clock this morning and we're still pumping and there's no sign of stopping. As long as they keep bringing us bags, we're going to keep packing them and sending them out.
Community organiser Wiggy is impressed with the turnout.
The whole demographic. We've even had the brothers from down at the curry hut bringing in curries, and there's people still on the barbecue there. That hasn't stopped. Football clubs, netball clubs, all walks have come here today to help. So it's unreal. So once it's all done, you can sit back and reflect, and fingers crossed we can save the town.
Hundreds of homes here have already been inundated by floodwaters from the Campaspe River, and many more are under threat ahead of the Murray River's expected peak. Among those packing sandbags are people who've already had to leave their homes, like 11-year-old Kelly.
Really stressful, had to get all of our stuff and only really pack necessities.
What did you take?
Some clothing and a few valuable items.
But you're here again helping out with the flood effort. What are you doing? Describe it to the listeners.
We're just putting the sand in the bags, and I don't really know what happens after that.
SES volunteers, including Mark, are using the sandbags to strengthen the man-made levees that have been built in the past few days.
The wall was moving a bit, so they've come in to reinforce it. Army, SES, CFA, local people, everyone have just come down to fix up this wall and make sure it doesn't break through.
This wall is 8 sandbags high and runs for 200 metres. It's just off the town's main street.
Well, as long as we can stop it leaking, we've got pumps and we hopefully keep it out. That's the main objective, just to stop the water coming through.
Despite the challenges, Echuca's residents are doing their best to stay upbeat. Evacuee Margie is celebrating her birthday in the town's basketball centre, which has been turned into relief accommodation.
Happy birthday to you. Yes, I'm 83.
And you've just had happy birthday sung to you in the relief centre. I'm sure you weren't expecting that.
I wasn't, because all my family are away.
And what brings you to the relief centre today?
We're flooded. We live just down there and we're flooded.
How badly?
Really bad. It's right up out the front and out the back. All the sheds and everything are underwater, and the boys next door swam to get the chooks out. That's how bad it is.
And you'll be staying here tonight?
Yes, yeah. We'll be staying here for a few days.
A memorable 83rd birthday then, Margie.
I'll never forget it.
A happy moment before some tough days to come.
In the UK, embattled Prime Minister Liz Truss is insisting she'll lead her party into the next election. In an embarrassing political U-turn, her new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has scrapped most of the tax cuts announced in the government's mini-budget just last month. It comes as questions mount over whether Ms Truss can survive as leader. The ABC's Steve Kinane reports.
So I now call the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Chancellor.
He's the fourth Chancellor the UK has had in less than 4 months. And just a few days into the job, Jeremy Hunt had to announce one of the biggest backdowns in British political history. Virtually all of Liz Truss's signature tax cuts, announced just weeks ago and designed to increase economic growth, would be abolished after the markets deemed them to be economically irresponsible. Jeremy Hunt said he made the decision after widespread consultation.
The conclusion I've drawn from those conversations is that we need to do more quickly to give certainty to the markets about our fiscal plans and show through action and not just words that the United Kingdom can and always will pay our way in the world.
In the Commons, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer was granted an urgent question to the Prime Minister about why she sacked her previous Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng. But Liz Truss did not turn up. Instead, she sent the Leader of the House, Penny Mordaunt, to face the music. She claimed the Prime Minister was detained on urgent business.
Well, the Prime Minister is not under a desk, as the Honourable. With regret, she is not here for a very good reason.
The looks on the faces of Tory MPs told the tale. The mood on the government benches was bleak. Labour's leader slammed the Prime Minister for failing to turn up.
So now it's time for leaders to lead. But where is the Prime Minister? Hiding away, dodging questions, scared of her own shadow. The lady's not for turning up.
Jeremy Hunt's announcement did inject more confidence into the markets, with the pound rallying and downward pressure being placed on mortgage rates. But the move has done little for the Prime Minister's credibility. The policies that rattled the markets were very much her own. And it was the new Chancellor announcing the repair job, not her. Former Conservative Minister Crispin Blunt is one of 4 Tory MPs who've called on Liz Truss to resign.
The position is frankly irretrievable, and we don't have time over the next 2 years to waste in seeing if we can repair Liz as our Prime Minister.
2 new opinion polls suggest that Labour has a lead over the Tories of around 30 points. With Liz Truss's program for economic growth now torn up and her credibility undermined with the electorate, many of her colleagues are asking what's the point of keeping her on as leader.
At least 4 people have been killed in Kyiv after Russia launched a barrage of kamikaze drone attacks on Ukraine. One of the victims was a pregnant woman. The strikes on the Ukrainian capital appear to be part of a wider assault aimed at critical infrastructure, especially power sources. Here's CNN's Clarissa Ward.
A policeman takes aim at the kamikaze drone as it bears down on Kyiv. Nicknamed mopeds in Ukraine because of their distinctive whine, 28 were launched toward the city on Monday. The majority are successfully shot out of the sky. But 4 break through, shattering the early morning calm in the heart of the capital.
So you can see that's the railway station down at the end. The air is thick with the smell of explosives.
Investigators are already collecting evidence.
Excuse me, извините, excuse me. Это Garan, it's from the drone, yes? Where did you find it? Где нашел точно?
Я нашел, там нашел.
So they're saying that's the tail fin from the drone that hit.
The target, according to Ukrainian authorities, Kyiv's energy infrastructure. But one hits a residential building nearby with devastating results.
You can see at least one person has been killed. They're taking the body away now.
Rescue workers comb through the smoldering rubble. There have been reports of voices still alive inside. An extraordinarily lucky older woman is rescued from her balcony next door and bundled away to the hospital. Up until 1 week ago, the city had been relatively calm. Now, Kyiv's mayor says the Russians' goal is to make life as miserable as possible for civilians as colder weather sets in.
The Russians want to destroy right now the critical infrastructure in our hometown.
water, electricity, heating.
What impact does it have on the psyche of the people of Kiev that there are kamikaze drones now attacking your capital?
Everyone is so angry. Everyone wants to defend the families, want to defend hometown.
As we prepare to interview a volunteer medic from Sweden, the air raid sirens start up again.
Organization called Swedish Rescuers.
All right, well, you must be used to hearing that sound by now.
We move to take cover. 3 cruise missiles have been reported heading in the direction of Kiev. This time, they are intercepted by Ukraine's air defensives. But Kiev's residents know that there will be more.
It's 23 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. In Ethiopia's war-torn Tigray region, the UN estimates 1 in 3 children are malnourished. The area has been besieged by war for 2 years and peace talks have just been postponed. Journalists have been barred from entering the region, but one crew from the BBC got through. Here's Hussein Mohammed, and just a warning, some of the details may be distressing.
The Tigray region in northern Ethiopia has been cut off from the world by war. In this village, no one has enough to eat. Many are starving. Fighting prevented farmers from planting crops, and the market stores are barren. There are no medical centers nearby, and people from this village are forced to walk 100 kilometers to a bigger town. Even there, resources are scarce.
After 2 days, the hospital will be devoid of any oxygen.
Dr. Tesai runs a hospital that has barely any medicine, electricity, or gas. He says more and more malnourished children are being brought here.
This is 1 year and 7 months old. He is severely malnourished. He should have been on therapeutic feeding now, but we are not giving him milk because we don't have milk. 6 months back, he was treated for the same case, malnutrition. It improved, and we sent him home. The mother couldn't feed him at home, so she came back. Because there is no food at home.
The Ethiopian government and the Tigrayan Regional Authority blame each other for the humanitarian crisis. And while peace talks falter, the fighting has intensified, restricting the flow of international aid.
We need someone to help us. Everybody knows there is a big problem, but they are just talking about the problem, not about the solution. People are dying every day, every minute. We are crying every time we see mothers crying due to death of their kids. So we are here just to watch them dying, nothing else. Cannot do anything. 11 years old, 8 kilograms. The weight is 8 kilograms, which is not...
Staff at this hospital say aid is desperately needed, but warn that for many, it may be already too late.
And finally tonight, a little bit about planes. You might have heard the phrase, big boys, big toys. And for Englishman Jerry Dyer, that phrase couldn't be more poetic. Jerry loves planes, all kinds of planes, and his Big Jet TV live streaming of planes has become a global sensation. Reporter Dave Allgood travelled to Alaska to meet Jerry at an airport in Anchorage.
Imagine being able to do...
Got a big smile on his face, look. He's happy. He's happy to be going flying. Shouting out to his mate in front, wait for me!
What you love to do.
Oh, nice, nice. Bit of condensation over the wing there.
All the time and all over the world.
Say, Jilly, can you tweet them? Can you tweet them, Jilly? Quickly, and just say, are you watching, winky face?
That is the life of Big Jet TV founder and energetic host.
Run away, run away!
Jerry Dyer, who today has parked his camera and 3,000 plus Big Jet TV subscribers on a hill overlooking the Ted Stevens International Airport.
And this is basically aviation heaven, as we're calling it, because it is. It is aviation heaven. There's nowhere else in the world you get the kind of scenes and visuals that you do here.
Being a fuel stop for international flights and boasting 3 runways over 10,000 feet, the variety of big jets that take off all day long here in Anchorage, well, it's an aviation buffet.
And there goes Captain Stevenson. 600 feet, make a left, and there it is. Oh.
Jerry's inflection and injection of bits of atmospheric and aviation knowledge just add to all the excitement.
You do have a lot of energy. Where does that come from?
Which, because I'm quite an excitable person, you know.
And even if you're not a plane person, you just can't help but be a Jerry person.
Chat box, do 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 do.
Jerry doesn't miss a beat. His camera's zipping back and forth with all the action on and off the tarmac. And still, after hours standing up here on a hill, he's energetically poetic.
Oh man. You can hear those blades thumping against the air, man, those big carbon blades. Growling just for that brief moment.
And like a plane launching into the horizon, the vision came to him in the most unique place.
One day I was lying in the bath. My nephew was not in the bath with me. My nephew phoned me up. He said, "You got to listen. You got to watch this. You got to watch this. Is on Periscope."
Lucky for us, Jerry can't turn off the funny. That was 6 years ago, and ever since, his plane hasn't landed.
So we were the pioneers, basically, for live stream aviation.
So we left this native of London, England, alone with his global family, camped on a hill, happy as a loaded plane taking off to...
What an amazing-looking aircraft.
Anywhere and everywhere.
Beautiful, man.
That report there from Dave Allgood. And we've got a bit of feedback now on inflation. We asked you about how the inflation situation was impacting you most, and we've had a one-word text, mortgage, with lots of exclamation marks after that. Quite a little bit coming in on emergency departments. This texter says investment in a fully funded primary healthcare system for low-income households would provide a much healthier system of health based on preventative and well-being care for all, and that would definitely lower the pressure on secondary hospital healthcare system, and something like Medicare funding of primary and allied healthcare, and with better access to a variety of therapies, physical and mental health, and that could make a huge difference. Another texter saying, imagine if we spent the same money on primary healthcare support that was spent on the pandemic. Well, look, that's it from us. The late news team will keep you updated through the night. And if you missed anything from the show, you can find Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And tomorrow from 5, as consumers feel the sting of inflation and look for a bargain, First Up rediscovers Reduce to Clear, a grocery clearance store that took off during the 2008 recession.
Making headlines this hour, the government says Gaurav Sharma's claim the Labour Party was planning to oust him next year to avoid a by-election is completely baseless. None of the country's big city hospitals are meeting their target for treating emergency department patients within 6 hours. The owners of Fakadi White Island will stand trial next year on charges relating to the deaths of 22 people in the 2019 eruption. And police are ramping up the installation of fog cannons, bollards and security cameras in retail stores to prevent ram raids. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7 o'clock.
If you think RNZ